So without further ado, let's get going. Oh, you're on mute, Montana.
Thank you. So before we dive into the virtual engagement practices, before we start all that, it's really important to understand the longstanding history that has brought all of us to reside on the land that we reside on. And so we want to acknowledge the lands in which our organizations and our work resides. The University of Minnesota is placed on the ancestral and contemporary Wapakut lands. I live on Mdewakanton lands, and Emily lives on Seminole and Tocobaga lands. Colonialism is an ongoing process that directly intersects with a lot of the processes that we're going to be talking about today. And so thank you for joining us in that land acknowledgement in the hopes of understanding the reality of land occupation. So we are your presenters today. My name is Montana Filoteo. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a research professional at the University of Minnesota School of Nursing for the MYST project.
And my name is Emily Singerhouse. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm also a research professional at Singerhouse Research Consulting LLC and Strategic Prevention Solutions. So we're going to do a quick overview of what we're going to be chatting about today. First, we're going to dive into what the MYST project is, what is virtual engagement, virtual participatory action research, how to use VPAR in practice, and then implications for the future.
Great. So first, we'll tell you a little bit about our work and how it's led us to sharing this presentation about virtual engagement with you all today. So the MYST project, as Casey mentioned, is the Minnesota Youth Sex Trading Project. We are a community-based participatory research project, and we are a mixed methods program of research representing different University of Minnesota schools, colleges, and research professionals. This is our mission statement that the MYST project works with communities and youth to co-create actionable knowledge about sex trading. Collaboratively, we seek to surface the wisdom of lived experience, drive systems change, and promote wellness among youth. And on the next slide, this represents some of the core staff and the core researchers that are on this team. People like Emily and myself have been working around the topic of youth sex trading since before the MYST project, but not pictured here is our community partners, our interns, our research assistants, and the youth with lived experience that all come together to make this work really grounded in community.
So the MYST project was formed due to the addition of a single question on the 2019 Minnesota Student Survey. The question being, have you ever traded sex or sexual activity for money, food, drugs, a place to stay, or anything else of value? 1.4% of 9th and 11th graders said yes. That is about 5,000 young people in the state of Minnesota. This is an underestimate due to limitations, and we do not know to what capacity trading sex was done. So the MYST project broke this percentage down just a little bit more into regions, gender identity, race and ethnicity, and life experiences. So in the top left corner, you can see that we broke it down into of the 8 safe harbor regions, which is a law that was created to assist youth in receiving services for sexual exploitation. In the upper corner, you can see that the Northwest region has a very high prevalence of trading sex. Some might believe that in the metro area, there might be more trading sex going on, but actually we learned that it was a much higher prevalence in more rural areas. In the bottom corner, you can see that we broke it down by gender identity. And some might believe that cisgender girls trade sex at higher rates than boys, but we learned that they trade sex at the same rates. So cisgender boys are just as likely and affected by trading sex and sexual exploitation. In addition to that as well, transgender and youth who are unsure about their identity have staggeringly high rates of trading sex, which is another call to action to why we're doing this work. In addition to that as well, the Native American and Native Plus youth in Minnesota have very high rates of trading sex as well. And those who have shared lived experiences, such as experience in foster care or in sexual violence, also have high rates of sexual exploitation. So all of this combined, this microanalyzation of this data really was a call to action to engage with youth online to address the high prevalence than what was originally thought.
And so with the Minnesota Student Survey question being the catalyst for forming the MYST project, we're just going to zoom in a little bit on some of the work that we as the virtual engagement team or the VET have done around virtual engagement and engaging youth. So recently are published in the Journal of Higher Ed Outreach and Engagement of our paper with the same title as this presentation. We also recently presented at the Engagement Scholarship Consortium about virtual branding for youth engagement, as well as understanding digital cultural competencies of youth online. We conducted our youth study. We're currently launching a question improvement via cognitive interviews to understand how youth understand and interpret select MSS questions. And we have given tons of virtual engagement in practice trainings and webinars, including the statewide webinar with our partnership with MINCASA, Coalition Against Sexual Assault. So in this presentation today, we'll try to give you a little bit of all of these works to really show what we are trying to add to the field for virtual participatory engaged research. And so now we can start talking a little bit about what virtual engagement is and kind of how we formed this idea.
So to start, what is engagement in the first place? So to us, engagement means addressing a specific community to engage with a specific issue and with the hopes of taking a specific action. So for example, scholars and researchers might want to work with a community who have lived experience in trading sex to tackle the issue of lack of supportive services and hopefully facilitate them into action, such as participating in our study or in organizing them to work in policy change. So to understand what engagement meant to others, for us to do better work with community, we created a statewide study with service providers across Minnesota who work to address sexual violence. And we wanted to assess how virtual engagement might work with them, what their priorities and needs might be, and if their perspectives are actually aligning with the youth that they work with who are experiencing sexual violence. And this response by a service provider in northern Minnesota was something that we really enjoyed and felt representative of virtual engagement. They said online engagement is the use of social media, texting, video chats, and more to educate and connect with youth to assist in prevention and offer services. So this next slide is what we view as virtual engagement as both a tool and metric. So to us, this practice of virtual engagement not only integrates, but also converts into an engagement style. So our work is interdisciplinary to develop virtual engagement as a source of quantitative data for engaged scholars, but also heavily drawing on social media marketing to apply VPAR strategies and approaches. And as I said, we're not simply converting research, but really integrating it into the community to make a much more deep impact of virtual engagement practices for community members. So for example, allowing feedback from youth to improve relationships and also help adjust virtual engagement strategies and research methods. And we've seen as well that evaluation and grant purposes are also a way that virtual engagement can be helpful. For example, with our partner MINCASA here in Minnesota.
So in-person engagement may not work for a variety of people for typical research or engagement purposes, but really just zooming in for youth who have traded sex, we identified some experiences and barriers that may make this typical in-person engagement method less accessible. For example, surveilled youth who are being surveilled by their trafficker or a parent, it may be a lot harder for them to access in-person engagement opportunities. Or youth who are isolated geographically and rural may not be able to travel to the research center. And so, youth who trade sex need engagement options to increase access, comfort, and representation on studies and community change making. But we also know that increasing options for youth who trade sex increases options for many other communities and experiences. So now that we've a little bit talked about what virtual engagement is and the power that it has to reach some of these critically missed and underrepresented youth, we offer the theory of virtual participatory action research as a new way of supplementing participatory action research existing toolkit. So earlier we mentioned we're a community-based participatory research project, which falls under that umbrella of participatory action research. There are many proliferations of this work, including youth participatory action research and our own, what we are writing and adding to VPAR theory. Our methods come out of this existing body of work that emphasizes an iterative research process with community members and those with lived experience at the center of our work. So the next slide shows a little bit of what this process may look like, this cyclical process on knowledge creation and action. So starting at the top left, we have new questions, or perhaps there's been existing questions in community, but we're connecting with community to dig deeper and find opportunities for future research. We are co-designing those questions with those with lived experience and community at the table to make sure, are we even asking the right questions? We are collecting data using trauma-informed and mindful approaches that try to do no harm, but also facilitate wholeness, well-being, and healing, increasing wellness. We analyze that data collected with the community and youth partners to help inform and ground that analysis. And finally, we act together. We decide together what are the changes that we want to leverage this research for, and look and see what are the new questions. And we start this process all over again. But beyond the process is also the strong relationships that we are forming, and that not only are the youth and communities at the center, but the relationships that are also built on respect and trust.
So why did we form Virtual Participatory Action Research? Why VPAR in the first place? So due to COVID-19 social distancing mandates, our team was required to completely retool and reshift to an online format. In addition to that as well, in Minneapolis, the city in which this project is based, we acknowledge that the change that happened from the George Floyd murder activated and affected our communities very deeply. We saw technology used in ways that it's never been used before. So for example, for mutual aid funds, distributing safety information, and created a safe and supportive community space for all those who were affected by police brutality and racial injustices. So by understanding these changes that happened online and in our society, we adapted our MYST project to honor those experiences, learn from them, and supplement existing PAR frameworks. So that formed VPAR. In our development, we hope to add back to the bodies of work to address the changing needs of our community post-COVID-19 and social uprising. To create that iteration of CBPR into the VPAR approach, here's a similar iteration that states that in partnership with communities and youth, these relationships are built on trust, transparency, authenticity, and respect. So by co-designing research questions and methods with community partners, we collect data online through online sources and use trauma-informed, mindful, and also culturally respective approaches based on the online platforms. We analyze that same data that was collected online with community and youth partners, and then again, act together to create a change based on the results of the information. So some examples of what we've actually done with this theory was to create a youth study. So this study was to create an understanding of how youth feel about prevention, intervention, wellness enhancement, and to really understand that 1.4% of youth who answered yes to trading sex in Minnesota. So our methods included a virtual semi-structured qualitative interview and online surveys distributed through Qualtrics. We honed in on the population of youth 16 to 21 years old who live or stay in the state of Minnesota, and those youth did not need to have knowledge or experience in trading sex. So it truly was open for everybody who is in Minnesota. And then recruitment was strictly online through Instagram's targeted advertisements, and then also sharing our study with community networks that we fostered online. So some examples of the questions that we asked, we broke them down into 4 different sections. One of them was experiences, risk and protective factors, intervention, and then prevention. So for example, please rank which life experiences are important to consider about youth who trade sex. We allowed them to rank different options such as experience in sexual violence or housing insecurity. We asked them about the current risk factors that exist for youth who trade sex. What could or should happen in schools to intervene for those youth? And then the last one was more of like an imagination magic wand question, asking them that if they had a magic wand, youth trading sex is completely prevented, meaning no youth trade sex anymore. What would have changed in the world? And we found that the magic wand question is something that is a lot more empowering for the younger generations, as they can understand in a much more simpler way the different ways that they can view their society if they had a magic wand.
And so while we are still in the analysis phase, there are some really strong themes that are really relevant to the presentation topic today. A lot about youth online culture and needs, and also arising out of that, what adults can do to be more supportive to youth in general. So some of the findings were that youth are navigating online culture and these online spaces in ways that are really unprecedented to some adult generations, which can lead to them feeling alone in navigating these relationships online, but also in real life, dating, violence, grooming, peer pressure, and various stigmatized topics. And that youth really need access to, at the very least, neutral, if not positive-based messaging and resources, and culture change on the topics that they really care about. And so on the right, we have some corresponding considerations that adults, including us as interdisciplinary scholars, can do to support and listen to that call to action from youth. So adults can do more to recognize, respect, and learn about youth online culture. Adults can provide relevant education, resources, and support targeted to youth on social media as they are asking for. And adults can address the fear-based education tactics and support already existing positive culture change efforts led by youth themselves. This is just, today we're going to share some more of those implications on how you can be taking what we have experimented in our VPAR for interdisciplinary teams. And so now that we've shared a little bit on how we've done it, we'll talk about how you can use it. And so this is how we ended up using it. This is just a quick snapshot on how we utilize VPAR in our work at the MYST project. So the way that we did this is we created an Instagram to slowly build trust over time to eventually engage youth to recruit for our studies. You can see on the left that we have a picture of our MYST project on Instagram. It's a bit small, but there is a highlight on team members to offer transparency on who the team members are made up of. And in the preview, there are a few topics, including sex trading by region, Disability Awareness Month, some information from Minnesota Student Survey on prevalence of sex trading and disabilities, as well as HIV and AIDS versus AIDS. So we kind of cover a lot of different topics that can overlap or are just relevant to youth audiences. In the middle, we have zoomed in on some select posts that I think really illustrate the potential of VPAR. The top being a study recruitment post. You'll notice it wasn't a typical flyer just put in an Instagram post, but we made a separate one formatted for Instagram dimensions. And that is that way that we did our only online recruitment for our study. Below that, you'll see the first title slide of a multi-slide post on trading sex, sexual violence, and chemical addiction, where we really dove deep into some of the data. And then finally on the right is a preview of a link tree, which is a link in bio option so people can post multiple links, and youth really enjoy using this as it's more accessible than navigating to a different website to find what they need. It's a really great hub where we have our research, we have our past research, who our team is, and local resources. So based on reflecting on all the work that we've done, we have kind of tried to simplify it into some steps on how to practice this on your own. So step one, we tried to focus on building our goals and values before we entered the virtual space. Just like in person, you have to be really prepared and humble whenever you're entering a space and doing the due research and thinking, what kind of approach do we even want to have when we're asking them to build our trust? Step two is to choose a single social media platform or a different virtual space that fits your needs as a project. We can dive into a little bit more on why we chose Instagram in a bit. Step three, to conduct community conversations to identify audience, what content and topics they really value, and feedback. Getting some of that information even before you start engaging is really, really important. Step four, when possible, if you're using social media, for example, you can use a business account, which is a free option to convert yours from a personal to business that offers analytics that you can measure impact, your reach of your posts. Step five, to create a content plan and start your content creation. That can be written, that can be visual, and something that we would use as an example is Canva as a free software that makes it very accessible to create engaging visuals. And finally, to be evaluating your process ongoing and addressing your capacity to expand your efforts. Maybe it's expanding more engagement, making more posts, or making more virtual communication. Maybe it's spreading to a different online space and learning more about that online culture to integrate meaningfully. That's just the overview. And then we'll dive into. So first, building your goals and values beforehand. Here we've outlined a couple of the common goals that engaged scholars have. They want to engage community, potentially for recruitment or dissemination of information. If you want to engage community, try to create content about topics that community cares about. If you're creating something that you all care about, but it's not really doing well because you're not connecting with your audiences, that's where that listening and conversation comes in. For recruitment, try to use shared community language, especially unique to those online spaces in recruitment, so that it is effective on that platform. Dissemination, you can publish data from reports in that content format rather than transferring it over. You can kind of reformat it to be accessible on that platform, but you can also make them accessible by sharing on a link tree, for example. And so something to consider when entering the spaces is the culture of use of each platform. And we argue that each platform has a different culture of use based on its intended purpose that the social media platform designers have created, but also who the audience is, who the primary age group of users are, and what that resulting culture is. At the bottom, we make a best use recommendation for each individual platform because each social media platform is not going to work for everyone. So if you look at the left column about Instagram, we can chat a little bit about how we chose Instagram. So for example, Instagram is a photo and video sharing app. You can share up to 10 photos and a caption to go along with it. The audience is primarily under 30 years old with 61.2% of users. So we know that, okay, that's a pretty young user base. But what is the culture of use? A lot of it tends to be a little more positive or aesthetic based, curated, but also there's a consumer aspect to it as well, that people use Instagram shopping. So we decided we could utilize this for our VPAR purposes by saying, okay, we will be focusing on accessible images and long form captions that are positive based. That is a really important value when working around sex trading, that a lot of our data is deficits based and not person centered, about talking about their own experiences. And so we wanted to enter that space as in accordance to that use by both emphasizing the strengths of community while also trying to combat kind of forced positivity at the same time. So our recommendations for best use is that that is a good place to reach youth, to educate and promote awareness. And so these are some of the recommendations we would make for other social media platforms that may not align with youth who trade sex, but each platform has a potential to engage community. It's just choosing the best fit for yourself.
All right. So with all of that information combined, what does this mean for the future? What are some of the takeaways that you can grab from this presentation? And so to start off with that, as a young research team, we would recommend hiring young researchers or young people in general to engage on your team by meaningfully hiring these young people to conduct the virtual engagement strategy. You're valuing young people as leaders, focusing on their strengths, and using the different forms of creativity from different age groups to take your goals of your project and research to the next level. Intergenerational teams are amazing. They definitely highlight and help build skills through people in each age group throughout the team. You can rely on each other based on your expertise and knowledge, and then share trust with the young people. With this step, we believe that team building is very critical. If you have an intergenerational team, a values-based team dynamic is also very important. So as we say, you should go in and ensure that you know your values before you enter the space, but as a team yourselves, you also need to know your values. And so in addition, you co-create those goals and values together in order to implement them online. So if there is no capacity to hire, though, that's totally fine as well. You can connect with students at your local community or university to offer volunteer internships. While this is not a requirement, we definitely would recommend that hiring young people or engaging them at some point in the process of your research is very important. Next, building trust and authenticity. So we've learned that trust and authenticity is probably one of the main reasons why we were able to get so many people to participate in our study. We didn't just start posting recruitment flyers right away. We spent months and months creating content, building followers, building relationships, and creating content that actually mattered to the populations that we are trying to connect with. So with any populations that is affected by systemic oppression, it will take a lot of time to do so. So for example, youth who are trading sex, there's a lot of mistrust within systems. And as a system ourselves, a part of the university, we had to ensure that we came across in a very respectful and trustful way. Because as you probably can tell, we are trying to help people. And so how do you actually convey that online? And that really is just by creating content that actually matters to them. And so as well as to build trust, you also need to know your values and to ensure that you convey your values online as well. And as we said before, we are an intergenerational team. So we recommend taking the skills from your field and transferring it online. So any skills that are from people who have been in the field for a really long time or have worked in multi-different fields, take all those skills and then transfer them online. Next, authenticity. So representing your account and project for what it really is. Are you a research project that's trying to conduct a study? Are you trying to understand a little bit more about services that are being provided? Are you trying to disseminate resources, research findings, whatever it is? Make sure that your account or virtual engagement presence in general represents what you're actually trying to do. Again, authenticity means centering your values at the core of your brand. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what a research brand is, you can send us a message and we can share with you our poster from the Engagement Scholarship Consortium that breaks down how to actually build a research-focused brand. And along with authenticity is don't be afraid to make mistakes. I made a couple of mistakes at this presentation, Wi-Fi, connectivity, presentation, it's okay. We have to be humble about who we are and what we do. And if you make a mistake online, we like to own up to it and just kind of say, hey, you're totally right. We're sorry we posted something in that way. Here's an edit and here's how we can move forward in the future. And lastly, centering accessibility and transparency. So accessibility is creating inclusivity. So ensuring that people can read your posts, whether it's through having image descriptions about what is actually in the content, having captions on your videos, but really ensuring that accessibility can be met through visual, mental, and educational lenses. And then encourage others in your community to do the same. So if there's others in your field that are trying to do something similar, encourage them to look into a little bit more about accessibility and what that can mean for you. And lastly, transparency. So transparency truly dips into every piece of VPAR. So trying to understand what the practices that you're trying to do, being transparent about your methods, what your goals are, who you are. And online transparency can really look like expressing your team values, who you are, your goals, where you get your funding, and so much more. We found that these strategies all combined truly made our strategy a much more safer and inclusive space, which we are very grateful about and are very happy that it happened this way. So with that, here's a shameless plug. Give us a follow on Instagram, check out our content, engage with us. And if you have anything that you would like to add or something that you think that we should cover, please send us a message and we are happy to do so. Or if you have any research that you think might be applicable to this, we would love to highlight that work and promote you guys as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll have a discussion here as well. But we also have our emails listed here where you can contact us as well.